Hello, everyone. Good evening. How is everyone doing? So, you're listening to Heart with Saima. It's a podcast show for people searching for that courageous person within us who wants to be inspired by listening to stories of ordinary people like myself doing extraordinary things. Like having this podcast and bringing on the guests who I'm going to bring on shortly. So, I am Saima Dhillon, your host. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be here. So, without waiting anymore, let me tell you a little bit about my guest tonight. Dr. Christy Matusiak is a holistically driven chiropractic physician practicing in Wilmette, Illinois, with integrated holistic healthcare. She has spent over the last decade helping patients overcome autoimmune conditions, digestive issues, hormonal imbalances, um, musculoskeletal pain, chronic inflammation, and more. She is also the author of a new book, which has just come out. It's called Coordinating the Chaos Through Birth and Burnout. It is supposed to support the newly postpartum mom struggling with finding herself and gaining her mental clarity. A little bit about me, Saima Dhillon. I believe in living my life, being unconventional and being authentic. So let's touch lives together, one person at a time. I'm a real estate agent, broker, commercial real estate broker by profession. I do have a digital marketing company. I am a podcaster. I am a RJ on a radio station. We have a show every Thursday from 1 to 3. I am a humanitarian as well. Join my women empowerment group on Facebook called Women of Noor. We have over 3,000 women. Our mission is diversity, inclusion, empowerment, and we hope to touch lives of everyone wherever we go. My podcast, Heart to Heart with Saima, is my sounding board. I'm a warrior, a non-conformist, and ordinary person hoping to do extraordinary things. And with that, without waiting anymore, let me bring on Christy. Hey, Christy, good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Saima. I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing great. The weather is changing here in the Dallas area, and you're in Chicago. So I believe I can see that you're wearing a sleeveless, which means that weather is probably nice and pleasant in Chicago as well.
It was almost 90 degrees here today. We had like 40 something degrees last week and rainy, and now we have this. And so when when given that opportunity or that difference, I just choose this at this point. It's made
Absolutely
for
right.
this.
I know, and that's crazy, right? Because you're in Chicago, I'm in Dallas, and in Dallas, it was a high of 89 today.
Wow.
So yes, similar weather. So without waiting anymore, Christy, you have a book which is coming out. So would love for you to share a little bit more about your book, and I'm going to hand over the screen to you so you can talk about it. So here
Sure.
goes.
Thank you so much. And first off, thank you so much for having me tonight, Simon. This is a blast. I can't wait to share more with you and just have a nice conversation. So, this is my book, if I can get it on screen appropriately, Coordinating the Chaos Through Birth and Burnout. I was actually just reading through it a little bit before we started now, because it's been a while since I kind of read my own work. And it actually was published kind of the middle to end of last year. And just like you said, it's to support the newly postpartum mother. Quite frankly, I really wrote it for myself. I have 3 boys right now. Their ages 11, 8, and 6. 6 in about a week. And I swear, I wish that I had known what I know now when I was ready to have my first. And that's how life works, right? We don't necessarily have the prep and the knowledge before we have the prep and the knowledge to share forward. I just kind of wish something like this had existed, which is kind of why I wrote it, because I'm like, I felt that there has to be more women out there that experienced what I experienced and are experiencing what I experienced, that I can probably help and move forward with this. So I share a lot of my own experiences through postpartum stress and insanity, not only through that, but also trying to keep your little human alive and healthy in that first year or so of life. So between my own experiences and experience with patients, I've really just tried to bring all that experience and knowledge forward to help support whoever is going through whatever they're going through in that first year postpartum.
So, Christy, if you're comfortable sharing, what did you experience? What did you? Because I know I've come across a lot of people who go through postpartum depression, and there's just, I guess it's hormonal and so much internal chaos which completely disrupts your life. So, if you would like to share and tell us what you experienced yourself.
Yeah. Each of my birth experiences and postpartum experience was.
And you do have 3
different.
children.
I've got 3, so they were all very, very different, and I share all those stories in the book too. But my first was, I don't want to label it and say it was by far the worst, but being real, it was by far the worst. And in a way, we don't know what to expect. I thought that I was prepared, but I wasn't prepared. And I put a lot of pressure on myself to have a beautiful, perfect, intervention-free, no medication kind of labor, and that didn't happen. And so for me, it was just like, I went into details of all the story, but it was just like one failure after another failure after another failure. I felt like I failed myself. My body failed me. I was failing my son. And in the end, I was thankful not to need a C-section. I did eventually deliver him vaginally, but it was heartbreaking. It was a 44-hour long labor. Spoiler alert. Wow. Very long, very arduous. And then after all of that, I couldn't breastfeed him like I wanted to. My milk just never really fully came in. I don't know if it was purely because of some of the other experiences, what ended up actually happening. I was told that basically I just didn't have enough breast tissue to make milk for the child. And so I didn't give up. One thing you'll know about me is I've got some strong tenacity. I've got grit. You tell me that something isn't going to work out, I'm just like, I don't care. I'm going to do it as long as I can. Nonetheless, even though I had that aspect about me, it was traumatic and stressful, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I didn't even recognize or realize that I was going through some postpartum depression until he was 2 years old. Because we just get so wrapped up in life and just hitting that autopilot mode and going into survival that we don't always think about what we're really truly experiencing. I also recognized, like, you go through the postpartum appointments. I had midwives, and so they'd give me this little questionnaire that says, okay, how often do you feel this? How often do you feel this? I know those questions. I'm a physician. I'm like, I'm not depressed. Check, move on. If I had actually thought through those responses, I might have gotten a different answer, but I didn't. And we just go so quickly through life sometimes without actually thinking through what we're really going through and how different circumstances are impacting us. Lack of sleep is impacting us. Hormones are impacting us, not to mention the rest of our life. And people that come over,
right?
Yeah. So I basically lived those first 2 years in a complete and total daze. And I look back at those years now and wish I'd done things differently, because now I have more knowledge to bring forward. And at the same time, it is what it is. We can only move forward. We can't move backwards anymore. But that was just some of, the highlights or lowlights of my experiences with some of that.
But isn't that life? I think at different stages of our life, we don't really, if at this stage, if I reflect back and look back, and think, okay, I would make some different choices in life. But I think that's just the journey of life, right? We are exactly where we are meant to be, and we have gone through the experiences experiences in life, because today, whoever it is we are because of those experiences that we have gone through, and that's just how the journey of life will continue.
Exactly. I 100% agree. You asked once before, you were going to ask on the show, if I could do anything differently in my life or change something about my past, what would it be? And ultimately the answer for me is nothing, because I believe exactly what you said, that if something were to have been different, I would be a different person today.
Yeah.
And I like where everything has brought me.
Yeah.
And so for better or for worse, through all of it, I wouldn't change a thing.
And that's, Christy, my podcast for me has been life changing. It's, I've been doing it 2 years now. And I consider myself so amazingly fortunate because, I tell everyone that every week, these past 2 years, I've had a different guest on the show, and a different guest who brings in their own wealth of knowledge and wisdom and experiences, and they come here and they share, and it's just such a phenomenal. I mean, it can't. I mean, it's even better than being with a psychiatrist or a psychologist, because with them you're working within that same capacity and same person. But with me, having talking to someone different every week, and just it just helps you grow so much. It helps you grow phenomenally.
I believe and I love that. I love watching different podcasts and listening to different things, because just like you said, everyone brings a different perspective, a different life experience and journey, and you can learn from everyone's experiences in just a different way. And sometimes we can hear virtually the exact same thing,
Yeah.
just a slightly different way, and then it resonates differently for you, having heard it from a different person at a different time when you're ready to hear it, so to speak.
And sometimes even repetition of stuff, right? You're listening, you're talking, and you might not grasp certain things, but then I think the universe just keeps sending those repetition of those same messages, and then they eventually get ingrained in you. And I think it's just so amazing to just learn from different people's experiences, because it takes a lot of courage to face your not just your fears, but to face everything that you have experienced, face your mistakes. And again, I mean, I do use that word mistakes very loosely, because I think it has a negative connotation, and it shouldn't, because all mistakes are just experiences which didn't give you the result that you hoped for, but they ended up teaching you something equally valuable. And success, failure, everything is just so subjective, right?
Agreed. Yeah, I love how you said that mistake is a loose term. And just same thing with failure. Failure, there is really no failure unless you give up and stop working towards what you really want. Then ultimately I feel like that could be a failure. But if you want to change something different and go a different direction, that's not even a failure either. It's all learning and growth and creating new experiences that are ultimately going to take you somewhere different.
I mean, I think our circumstances, our surroundings, it just forces us to judge ourselves so harshly. And I don't think there's any need for us to judge ourselves so decisively,
Yeah,
as to we are this or we are that, because what everything is what the standards have been set by humans, right? I mean, otherwise everything, they're all just experiences.
yeah. I sometimes believe we're really our own worst critic, because if your best friend went through what you went through and said, "Oh, I messed this up, what would you tell your best friend? No, absolutely not. You can get back out there. This is just a learning experience through growth and this and that. This is what I would tell you to get through what you're going through."
Yeah.
And yet we don't tell ourselves the same thing frequently, until maybe weeks or months or so later. Then we can look back in hindsight and have that perspective to say, okay, I now get it. But we don't always treat ourselves that kindly in the moment.
And we should. I think kindness begins with you,
Yeah,
because however you treat yourself is exactly how you will treat every other thing or situation or circumstances or people around you. But it takes a lot of courage for you to come out and talk about this, because so many people, so many women suffer from hormonal imbalance, suffer from postpartum, and they don't realize what it is that has them in this chaos, internal chaos, and everyone is questioning them. And you just don't you just don't understand what is wrong with you. What
right.
made you realize there was something amiss?
Like I said, I didn't think of it or realize it until 2 years in. But especially if I look back, my son was born in August of that year, and my birthday was in December. And I'm not a super selfish, like everybody look at me kind of person, but at the same time, I enjoyed my birthday. And that year that he was born, people were saying, "Oh, what are you doing for your birthday? You know, your birthday's coming up." And I literally shut them all down. And I was intense about it. So I was like, no, like I don't even want to think about my birthday. I don't want to talk about my birthday. It does, like, I virtually told people it didn't exist is what I did. And that kind of began my steps, so to speak, unconsciously. It began this process of eliminating who I was from my life because I now had a child, and so I don't matter anymore, which I recommend my book not doing because just because we have exactly what
I said, because you matter.
Oh, absolutely. You matter. In fact, I mean, if anything, you matter more, because if you don't take care of yourself and your own vessel, you can't support and take care of anybody else. It's the stupid cliche, you know, when you're on an airplane, if the cabin loses oxygen pressure, whose mask do you need to put on first? If you're not alive to support your child, your child won't, you know, like, you have to take care of yourself first. And that's one of the most important chapters that I wrote in there. Once you got to put yourself as a priority. Self-care is not a luxury. It's an absolute necessity.
It is. And most people don't resonate with that. Most women don't resonate with that.
Right.
You know, most cultures don't encourage women to put themselves first or for them to be a priority. It's like it's selfish for you to think about yourself when you should think about yourself. So when you got that realization, Christy, what did you do then?
I got a lot of support and help and guidance from peers and colleagues of mine. So I'll give you some background then too. What I do as a holistic chiropractor is we do a lot of muscle testing work in the office. And so through structural corrections, chiropractic work, musculoskeletal type things, plus emotional balancing. So we can go through and use muscle testing to determine what emotions and meridians and systems are off in your body and correct that with different modalities, plus nutritional supplementation and whatnot. And so from a very holistic, like all-inclusive perspective, I went to different colleagues of mine and said, all right, we're kind of semi-thinking of having a second child at some point. I want to get over the trauma of my experience. I want to get over the trauma of feeling like my body failed me, like I failed him. I basically, if I can use some language on here, basically I need to get my shit together before I can do something else. Yeah. And they kind of just help support me because I feel like, you know, we can know things logically, but we can't always do those things for ourselves when our subconscious old belief systems and things of that nature get in our way. And so sometimes we need an external support system to guide us through that process independent so we can't self-sabotage. And so I had a couple different colleagues help me through that. And then it was after my son.
Sorry for interrupting you.
No, you're good.
These colleagues, they were psychiatrists, psychologists. What was it?
Chiropractors like myself. Okay. So these are people who just do holistic medicine work. So there were no medications involved. Some supplementation was involved. So just different nutritional remedies, homeopathy, vitamins, herbs, and things of that nature. But never once was I needing a medication. Not that there's anything wrong with medication. I believe that it absolutely can save lives in certain situations. But for the most part, I try to do things without the use of prescriptive medications because they do sometimes cause a lot of imbalances and side effects that we don't necessarily want. But absolutely, like, depending on where somebody's at in their postpartum journey, it absolutely can be life-changing and life-saving if that's what's necessary. But yeah, so it was just through that sort of work and those colleagues that I was able to kind of just get through things. It was really through a system called neuroemotional technique that was really, really helpful. So
what exactly is this technique?
Yeah, so the system, so we use muscle testing. So I as the practitioner would be testing you and going through different reflex points on your body and connecting, say, the emotion of anger. Anger tends to go with liver function. Okay, so if this is what came up on your body, tell me what's making you angry right now. Oh, my spouse and I just had a fight last night and whatever happened. Okay, what was the most challenging part of that argument? And you can say, well, it was that I'm totally making this stuff up right now, right? That he wasn't listening to me and I felt unheard. I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel like my opinion mattered. Okay. So then we take it back through on like an energy kind of system. We take it back on your body's and your energy's timeline to see if there was an original event where you felt unheard, unseen, unimportant, not supported, and angry about it. And let's go through and we keep muscle testing and we find, okay, so when you were 7 years old, this comes up again. Is there any circumstances that you think when you were 7 that this was an issue for you? And the person can then think back and say, well, you know, when I was 7 at school, I had this teacher who gave me a failing grade in this class, and I really answered all these questions right, but they wouldn't listen to me. And so in the situation in the current present moment with one's husband, they can be reacting from that 7-year-old self that didn't feel unheard, that felt unheard and unseen at that time. So instead of reacting and being conscious through the emotions that you're experiencing, we get triggered. If you've ever heard of the Pavlov's dog, do you remember those experiments that we learned about, where the researchers did an experiment with these dogs and they would ring a bell and show them some meat and the dogs would salivate. And so they saw the meat, they start to salivate, and eventually they would just start to salivate just from ringing the bell alone, even though they wouldn't present the meat anymore.
Okay.
Is through this classical conditioning. So human beings have this system too, that we start to we get conditioned to have a certain emotional or energetic response to a trigger in our environment, even if it doesn't make logical sense anymore. So through that system, we can kind of go back, retrain the subconscious mind to let go of that as a trigger, and then move forward into the present moment with more clarity and balance.
Okay.
So that's a lot of what I went through and what I do for my patients too.
So I'm going to ask you some questions which are just very naive questions, because because I don't, just for my understanding, because that's how I always treat my podcast. I feel when I, as a lay person, will learn, it will help other ordinary people just
ask whatever you want.
So Christy, there was I've been told that a chiropractor, the practice itself, it's a placebo effect.
Mm.
Is that a controversial statement? Perhaps?
No.
Okay.
No, I would say, well, I don't believe it's placebo. That said, I do believe that if someone believes that nothing will help them, nothing will help you.
Yeah.
Like there has to be some form of
belief system
or investment in what you're trying to pursue, whether that's chiropractic care, or whether that's a medication or a surgery. If you go into that thinking, well, this isn't going to work, it's not going to work for you. That said, I have had several patients that come in thinking like, I don't know, this is the last shot. I've tried everything. You're my last hope. And they see progress because we offer a different perspective that they've never experienced before.
Now, you also mentioned, so there's actual hormonal therapy as well, right? Where they work on the hormonal imbalance. You see a lot of teens going through hormonal imbalance.
Yep.
So is that something that could help these teenagers, like chiropractic measures, or in conjunction with hormonal, or just hormonal, or shed some light on that?
Yeah, I love this question because I see a lot of teenagers, and conventionally in like Western medicine, there's this tendency to say, oh, you have a hormonal imbalance, great, just get on birth control. And to me, that's not fixing the root cause. Right? That's just putting a Band-Aid on the situation. It's like if you were driving down the street in your car and your engine light came on, let's just put a piece of tape over it and keep driving. Nobody would in real life do that, because you know that you're just going to continue driving, not seeing the problem, but knowing the problem's still there. That's what these kinds of therapies tend to be. It just puts a Band-Aid over the problem and you don't actually figure out what the real hormonal imbalance is. And so I see teens all the time that have horrible periods, right? Cramps, heavy bleeding, acne, all sorts of imbalances. And I'll tell you a secret. I have a lot of women in my office that complain of PMS, right? It's not normal. I'm gonna let that land for a second. It's not normal to have cramps or breast tenderness or mood changes or any of those kind of symptoms that we tend to associate with getting our cycles. It's
Okay.
really, really common. And we've gotten to the point in our culture that we assume that anything is common is normal. Just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal. It just means that it's so common because so many people are so imbalanced. And so if our hormones are perfectly balanced and healthy and we're centered, we don't have those kinds of symptoms. Like, I'll get totally real. Every time I have a cycle every month, it's like a barometer check for me. How has my last 30 days been? Was I on time? Did I have any symptoms? Was I extra emotional? And if any of those things are off, then I recognize, okay, well, what have I done in the last month that could have contributed to that? Emotionally stressful, dietary indiscretions, not drinking enough water, not exercising enough, sleep being off. Like, there's 1,000 different things that can impact those. And if we're just assuming that those things are normal, we're never going to give it a second thought. But if you actually take time to look inward and say, all right, I actually have cramps this month. What could that indicate? It gives you a different perspective.
So if you have irregular periods, or if you are very moody and you're cramping a lot, that's an indication for you to look back and reflect and see lack of exercise, not drinking enough water, dietary habits, like maybe not eating nutritious food. So these are all indications that because of all this, the stress that you're consuming from the environment and not giving your body enough nutrition to help you fight and fend off the stress, that's resulting in your current situation of having, irregular periods, cramps, being in a lot of pain. So how do you, what's the cure?
So everything you just said, 100%, beautifully said. So when I work with people, I'll go through all those things to just check on their sleep hygiene, their nutritional status, water intake, exercise, all those things. And it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. I mean, I can't tell you what everybody needs to do because everyone's slightly different. Their physiology is different. Sometimes there's also supplements that people need. Magnesium is a big one that I see frequently with cramping. It could also be like specific hormonal herbs that tweak certain things. Because if somebody's got really heavy bleeding, was that?
Like what kind of herbal medication?
Some
Or
of them, one of them is called chase tree. So
okay.
it's one of my favorite herbs to help someone who has been bleeding for like weeks to stop it. Or likewise that has not had a period in say 6 months to start it. And so some of these herbs can be really powerful. Shepherd's purse.
What was that called again, Chris?
Chase tree, CHASTE, and tree like the tree that you'd see in the yard.
Okay.
That also goes by Vitex. It's if you see Vitex, VITEX, that's another name for chase tree.
Okay.
Shepherd's purse is another one that's good to stop heavy bleeding. And there's a lot of adrenal adaptogenic herbs that are sometimes really important for psychoregulation, because the adrenal glands, there's these little glands, they sit on top of our kidneys, and they're very important for overall health. In fact, when we also talk about menopause, so we're talking about PMS and everything, when we go and fast forward to menopause, women assume once again that hot flashes, dryness, fatigue, sleep imbalances and whatnot, that all these things are normal, but they don't have to be normal. If our adrenal health is in check, then we kind of ease into menopause more easily.
Did you say adrenal health?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the word?
Yes. So the adrenals they sit on top of our kidneys, and they handle all the stress in our life, no matter where it comes from. So we talked about weather earlier when we first started, right? Weather in Chicago has been a stress in my life. Like, it's been absolutely ridiculous. It goes from 40 to 80, back down to 40 to 30. Like, it's all over the map. That's a stress to our bodies. We have to adapt to that.
Yeah.
Just like food can be a stress to our bodies if we're eating McDonald's every day, or if we're eating nice, nutritious salads and whatnot every day. Things in our environment that could be toxic or that we don't want in our system or that we're not getting from our system. like if we're nutritionally deficient in something, that's a stress. Not to mention the obvious sources of stress, like our relationships, our work and whatnot. So stress comes in many forms, right? Emotional, chemical, structural, thermal, whatnot. So the adrenals handle all of that stress no matter what. And over time, if they get tired and they're not going to be supporting that woman's stress as much as they could because they're kind of burning themselves out, when we reach that time of menopause, the ovaries go, because the adrenal glands can produce these hormones too. The sex hormones that the ovaries usually produce, the adrenals are capable of doing that. So when the ovaries say, we're kind of ready for retirement, we're done, they ask the adrenals, hey, adrenals, would you guys mind picking up the slack, producing some of these hormones too, so that we go from like a kind of gradual decline? And in a good, healthy, strong woman, they go, sure, we got this, no problem. And there's virtually no symptoms. Or if they are, they're gradual.
Is that where hot flashes come?
Mm-hmm. Exactly, because in most women, most of the time, because we all burn ourselves into the ground for the first 40, 50 years of our life, the ovaries ask the adrenals, hey, help us out. We're ready to retire. Can you please start producing some of these hormones too? They go, nope, sorry, we're done too. We're going to crash at the same time. And then the woman goes from having this many hormones to just virtually crashing what it feels like overnight. And that's where some of those symptoms come from. So with regard to herbs, especially early on in life, sometimes we need rhodiola. That's RHODIOLA. Rhodiola is a really good adaptogenic herb to support adrenal health. Ashwagandha is another one. I could spell that, but that one's going to be long.
You know what?
So, we can always put it in the chat later.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of these different things. And once again, there's not a one size fits all approach. And so that's why I personally will use muscle testing to see what each person needs, because your needs are going to be different than mine, different than your neighbors, different than your daughters, and so forth.
So, I think whether you're, especially teenagers, especially girls who are entering their, around the age of 12 before they start their periods, and pregnancy, where your hormones are continuously changing. When you're reaching menopause, these are these certain stages of life where your body is actually going through a hormonal change. What would you advise, Christy? What should parents of teenagers or women going through pregnancies, especially postpartum, menopause, women, in their 40s or 50s, whenever menopause hits them, what do you think? What advice would you give them?
Yeah. The simplest advice that I can give across the board that doesn't get specific is to visit what I call the 7 best doctors. Now, these doctors are not actually people. They're things that we can do in our everyday life that will support us. And I mention these and go through them one by one in the book. But number 1 is sunlight. Get outside, enjoy the sunlight, because it's incredibly impactful. Not only does it create vitamin D, but it creates some balance and shift some of the hormones in our brains just from the sunlight alone. Secondly, fresh air. So once again, goes along with being outside and getting that energy from the earth. Number 3 would be quality diet. So really looking at your food intake, not eating too much sugar. I mean, certain things are universal. Sugar is one of them. Nobody healthy. Sugar is not a health food. If it were put on the market today, it would not get past the FDA. That's how toxic sugar is. And that's not to say that I don't have it from time to time. I'm human too. That said, look at your diet.
Yeah.
Number 4 would be water intake. The quality of water and quantity of water. I usually recommend half our body weight in ounces of water per day. This is my 3rd bottle today. Sleep would be number 5. Making sure you're not only getting quality sleep, but good quantity of sleep. Exercise. And once again, this looks different for everybody, but making sure that you're moving your body in a way that's appropriate for you and your system. And then lastly, joy. And so through all these 7 best doctors, whether you're in a PMS phase or approaching menopause phase or newly postpartum phase, all of these simple things. They're not always easy to achieve every day, but they're very, very simple. If we just go one by one, am I doing all these things for myself?
Yeah.
Then you'll usually figure out, okay, where am I falling short? And if you go through all 7 of those things and say, check, 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 everything's 1,000%, and I still feel like garbage, then there's really something off that you'd need to seek some kind of professional support from. So I usually recommend seeing somebody holistic, either a naturopath or a chiropractor like myself. I could always offer a link to find people that might be close to you. I do also offer remote visits as well. But that can be really helpful because, like I said, you might just be missing something obvious like magnesium, or you might be missing an herb that might correct things for you. So sometimes it's not always that simple, but that's the best place to start.
Would a physical, going for a wellness exam, is that something, getting your blood work done to see what deficiencies you might have, vitamin D or B12? I mean, B12 is something which a lot of people have that deficiency, and that does create, I believe it creates a lot of imbalances in your body.
Yes, 100%. I do a lot of blood work, and that would be an excellent place to start. However, many physicians, unfortunately, don't always tell you if something's off as long as it's in the range. Okay. So like if this is the standard range, mm-hmm. and you are right there, they'll say you're fine, everything looks normal. Whereas this might be the optimal range. And so if you fall outside of the optimal range, we can actually address that and correct that before you become pathological, because some doctors, as long as you're in the range, they don't care. Other doctors think more functionally speaking. And then sometimes it's really a matter of, if you don't feel right, trust yourself. Because I've had patients over and over and over again come to me and say, my doctors looked at my blood work and say everything's completely normal, but I feel this, I'm tired all the time, my skin is breaking out, I've got this, and they list this whole laundry list of symptoms. Just because the blood work's normal doesn't mean you're balanced.
So then, coming to you, what would you do, which is going to be different than the regular blood work that a doctor would do?
Yeah, I'll look at a lot of the same blood work, but just look at it with a different perspective and different set of eyes. So for instance, one thing that would be different too is, let's take cholesterol, for instance. Someone will look at someone's cholesterol and say, your cholesterol is too high. I'll look at that same person's cholesterol and also ask a couple of other questions. One, where are the ratios of all the different types of cholesterol, so that we can compare them to each other? There's good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. I don't really believe there's any bad cholesterol, but that's a separate issue. I look at the ratios between all those, look at the triglycerides, and frequently I'll say, your cholesterol is perfectly normal. Don't worry about that. Other times I'll say, yeah, your cholesterol is high, but guess what? You just told me your whole life story. Because when I work with patients, I get their whole life story. I hear about, what their mother's pregnancy was like with them, and what their childhood was like growing up, and what their current relationship is like, if they've had any traumas physically or emotionally. And so I look at their whole story, and then I find out, oh yeah, you have high cholesterol because guess what? Your stress hormones come from cholesterol. So if you don't have enough raw material, you're never going to be able to make your stress hormones that your body needs at this time. So
real quick, pause you.
Yeah.
So you said your stress hormones come from having high cholesterol?
They don't come from having high cholesterol. They come from cholesterol. So cholesterol is like the raw material to make your vitamin D. Okay. It's also the raw material to make your stress hormones like cortisol. It's also the raw material to make your sex hormones like estrogen and testosterone. And so if you don't have enough of that raw material, you're not going to be able to make things. That's why I usually find too low of cholesterol is a bigger problem than too high of cholesterol. But that's part of the perspective that I'll take. Is I come from the perspective that I believe your body's smart and intelligent and knows what it's doing for the most part. Whereas some other physicians will look at the body and say, something's wrong, that has to be corrected. And so I'll go through and say, okay, this might be the optimal range. If you're outside of there, why might you be outside of there? Sometimes it's easy. Okay, you're not eating healthy. Let's change your diet. End of story. Sometimes it's also you're deficient in this one vitamin. Okay, we can give you B12. Other times we have to dig a little bit deeper. Like if all the blood work really is fully normal, even from those functional standpoints, what else is going on in that person's life that's causing them to feel a certain way?
Okay, so could be just basic stress, right? For teenagers, just school or friends or social circle.
Yep.
I mean, there's just so much drama that you see in teenagers' life. Um, Postpartum, your hormones are in chaos, and when your hormones are in chaos, and you're depressed, and you're crying, and you're in tears, and you just can't seem to understand the child who's right there in front of you, whose life you're responsible for, and perhaps you feel that you don't have the energy, you're just not feeling it, right? So that's all. This is stressful for women, right? To feel that, oh my God, I've given birth to this child and I'm responsible for this child's well-being, but I'm just not feeling anything, and all that is hormonal imbalance.
Yeah, very much. And
Even
it's incredibly overwhelming.
I mean, same thing with when you're in your 50s and you're going, or your 40s, depending on the level of stress. Um, you might hit menopause early, ahead of time, because of your level of stress, and you're going through all these different things, losing hair, gaining weight, all this, and it's all connected to stress.
Yeah, and it once again, it sounds kind of silly and cliche when we say, yeah, this is all stress related, but most chronic diseases have stress as an underlying cause. Cancer, autoimmune conditions, anything digestive, anything with itis is inflammation, and many parts of inflammation come from stress in one way or another.
So, Christy, what about MS? What about other autoimmune conditions? Is that something that I mean, would you suggest, or do you experience or receive patients who have what is it? Uh, lu- no, lupin? No, what is it?
Lupus.
Lupus. Do you see those children as well, or people who are suffering from autoimmune? Because that's 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 devastating. It's life shattering, especially when you see teens go through it.
Yeah, I haven't had a lot of teens with lupus, but I see a lot of grown women with lupus, and most often we can get it into a remission standpoint through different supplementations. Frequently, I find stress of some capacity, and liver function is at the root of those situations. And so we definitely clean up diet with regard to anything autoimmune related, and then a lot of the rest of it is mental and emotional stress. One thing, I don't know if you've heard of Louise Hay. Saima, have you heard of her?
Louise Hay, Heal Your Body. I think I was on this. Zoom call a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about this book, Heal Your Body. Okay.
Yeah, she has another book that's a little bit bigger. This is like the shortened version I keep in my office. But her other book is Heal Your Life, and she was a pioneer in her field, where she really just made a lot of connections between our body's physical manifestations of disease and their metaphysical or emotional based root causes. And so if we think logically, what is an autoimmune condition? Our body is attacking itself. So if we back it out on an emotional level, those of us who have some autoimmune, what are we attacking ourselves for? What are we beating ourselves up for? What are we eating ourselves alive about? And sometimes it's not as easy as I'm making it sound, believe me. But it's about really diving deep and looking at those, asking yourself those hard questions, and getting some clarity and working through some of those demons that we all have in our minds.
So how do you? Oh,
I know this is getting way deeper than we thought.
That's the $100 question, Christy. How do you take care of and get rid of those demons who live inside your head?
Well, I can share, it's a lifelong process. So I can share another personal story. So my thyroid has been historically my weak point. And when I had my first son, it was about 1.5 years in that I realized my thyroid was underfunctioning. And this is once again through my holistic healing support system that I have. And at that time, I took a couple supplements for it and it kind of rebalanced out. But then I got pregnant again and the thyroid got out of whack again. And this time it took longer to heal. And right as it was just about to feel like it was really back to where it should be, got pregnant again. And it started the whole process over. And that third time really knocked it out. Like literally my third son was born in May of 2016. I was standing up on a friend's wedding in October. In August, I got measured for her dress. In October, it didn't fit. You think that when you have a baby, you're just constantly losing more baby weight so that the future you can just trust that it's going to be less. Not in my case. So talk about like can't lose weight. There was nothing. I always eat healthy. I always exercise. I always do the quote right things. But it's not always that simple when you're dealing with hormones. And so for years, I just gave up trying. I literally was just like, you know what? I'm not going to focus on eating super healthy. Now, did I eat a bunch of junk? No. But I wasn't going to like go crazy restrictive on anything if nothing was going to work. And so I let go of all that. But here's the catch. 2020 happened, right? In January of 2020, before the pandemic, I had my TSH levels. This is a thyroid marker measured. For someone in my age group, it should have been between 1 and 2. Mine was at 15. This was indicating a very, very serious hypothyroid situation. And mine was autoimmune in nature, Hashimoto's. At that point, I'm like, should I just give up my holistic ways here and just get on a medication? Because that's where I was at. And with consulting with a few colleagues, we all agreed it's worth a shot trying to go natural one more time and just see what's going to happen. Because at this point, there's nothing to lose. A lot happened in 2020. I'm not going to go into all the details, but not only COVID, but stuff in my relationship shifted in a really large way, which allowed some things to come to the surface that had been previously suppressed. And thyroid is a lot about throat chakra, which is opening up and letting things go, expressing your truth. It's a channel of creativity. And it was through a lot of that energy healing and that emotional clearing of stuff that I had in my history that I wasn't liberating. Once we got through that year, by I want to say October, November of that same year, my TSH level was down to 2 point something.
Oh, wow.
And I never took a single drop of Synthroid. And so suddenly it was like magic. I dropped 50 pounds in that last year virtually effortlessly, but I wasn't doing anything different. I was just living with healthy hormones. So
what did you do to make that transition?
It was painful. A lot of it was supplementation, and it was keeping really tight watch on what supplements I needed to be on this week versus this week versus this week. There was a lot of shifts and changes as we tested through. But the biggest piece for me was really the energetic and emotional piece of what we literally need to get off of our chest, let out of our bodies. Because if we're not letting stuff out, it's staying in. And when stuff stays in, Saima, it causes a lot of issues. And one of the biggest lessons that I've had in the last 3 years, not just from a health standpoint, but financially, from a scarcity mindset perspective, all of it, is the more we get real with what's going on and stop hiding behind this facade and like faking it till we make it kind of perspective, the less we fake it and the more we just get real and vulnerable, the more we heal. And sometimes that sucks, but it's the only way through it.
Yeah, and which is something, for me, it's been, I think it's been a turbulent decade. just different things happening. And when you are in that space, it impacts you, and the hit comes from every direction, because that's where your energy is, and that's what you start attracting from every direction. And I think what the podcast did for me, I mean, I have been a vocal person, but um, it it was just difficult. And my own journey was impacting my children, it was impacting the household. And we took a couple of financial hits, and the financial hits were impacting everything else as well. So there were just a lot of different things. And what I realized was that, but here I am, I'm a realtor. I think throughout the throughout the decade, what my salvation always was that I loved my passion. I have wanderlust, so I love to travel. And I would just, whenever I couldn't understand anything, I would just go to DFW airport, and that's nirvana right there, being in that terminal D, which is the international terminal. And I would just, go travel, take my kids, travel, travel, travel. And I think that at least gave me a balance. But I did realize that when I started my podcast, and in my podcast, when I started being vulnerable, I was always very authentic. Always, I had no issues, talking about my journey and my highs and lows. But streaming live, and talking about my own journey, and then becoming more vocal and expressing more things, and which is very difficult to do, especially in my community, because my community is very, the good is there, but then it's a judgmental community too, because it's a niche community. So, people judge. It's unfortunate, but everyone is judged based on, what people see, where you live, what you drive. I mean, that's just how it is. And then coming right there in the middle of all that, and showing your authenticity, and showing your vulnerability, and putting it out there to give other people courage to. And now it's like, Christy, it's uh, you know in my authenticity, I've lost um, I've lost people too. But in my authenticity, I always focus on the good. And I have, wherever I go, I have people who come to me and who tell me that my mom watches your podcast, or we wait for your podcast, or we watch your podcast, or because people might not show their vulnerable self on social media, but everyone's going through their highs and lows. And when they see that, although as a realtor, people always felt that it was larger than life. Everything appeared perfectly, because of course we post the perfect pictures, of course we showcase the perfect trips, of course we show that we are a perfect family, but we really are not. And when you start showcasing those things, and people are able to resonate, and they're able to connect, and they feel that, um, it's okay for us to feel what we are feeling. It's okay for us to, instead of just consuming all the toxicity and keeping it all inside us and not expressing, it's okay, because we took a huge business hit in 2016. It just completely, it was like being in a tsunami. It just created a havoc, and it just, and then went through my divorce last year. But purposefully, with choice, it was something that was done in as much in the most amicable way as I possibly could. And it was intentionally done so. And it was done so to make sure that at whatever cost, as much as we could, salvage our own peace of mind, our children's peace of mind. Going through that, the kids were already in chaos, but then um, it's so ironic, then going through the divorce and being in the place where I am, I see my kids heal as well. I'm healing, they're healing, because they are sponges. They're just sucking off my energy. And it's just life teaches you so much. Um, you go through it and you're like, oh wow, I just didn't realize I was just in that survival mode for the longest time, and just going through an automated process of movement of just this or that, and the divorce forces you to just completely pivot. And then you're like, okay, I'm by myself, I'm just it's a different direction. But then you see that you start healing, and as you heal, your kids start healing.
Mm-hmm. You said so many things in there. There were such beautiful nuggets, and I 100% agree with. One of them was, I wrote a couple of things down. The whole process of healing is a journey.
Yeah.
That's part of why I shared my thyroid stories, because my thyroid journey is not over. It's healed tremendously in the last couple of years, but it's not over. My autoimmune markers are still present. So I know I still have a lot of internal work to do. We're never done.
Yeah.
Because that's how life is, right?
Yeah.
And we never know, like you said, through being vulnerable and through being really truly authentic and raw and real, we never know who we're impacting. Yeah. I have a YouTube channel too that I used to do weekly videos on, and I took a step back for a little while because it became a little stressful for me to constantly come up with new content, and then I wasn't always feeling like it was being watched and received. And I've gotten comments from people saying, oh, I really wish you would do more of those. I wish you would talk about this. And I was like, oh, you watch? Sometimes we don't know the impact that we're making on people because, like you said, some people are not in that place to share their stories publicly. Yeah. They just watch quietly from the sidelines,
yeah,
and just observe. And so we never know who we're impacting. And then I love just what you said about our kids being little sponges. They absolutely are. They're little sponges, they're little mirrors. And that's the other thing I mentioned in my book in general, is just the sense of, if your kids are going through something, I always look at myself first. Okay, am I okay? Am I stable? Yeah. What energy am I putting up? Because they pick up on that first and foremost.
Yeah.
And they go through their own stuff. Don't get me wrong, especially as they get older. But especially when they're little, they play off of you. Like it's teaching pain tolerance, right? Your toddler falls down and scrapes their knee. If you freak out, oh my gosh, are you okay? Are you about to die? Yeah. They're gonna learn that every time they fall down, they have to freak out.
Yeah.
So some of that is a learned response. And if we can become less reactive and more mindful in our own lives,
yeah,
they're gonna pick up on that energy too.
Which is something that I did do mindfully with my children. I never let them feel that I have I will not eat bananas, but they don't really know. They haven't really caught up on it because I'm very nonchalant about it. I took them bungee jumping to New Zealand, and I told them, okay, we are going to be in Queenstown. They were 12 and they were 15 at that time, and I was like, if you are going to jump, this is the place to do it because this is where it was invented. But you have time to think about it. I myself would never bungee jump, but I took them there. I was like, once I buy the ticket, then you will have to jump. But until we do, you have an opportunity to back off. So you know what they did? They jumped. My younger one, who of course was 12 or 13 at that time, when she jumped from the bridge, she didn't even give me a chance to get my camera ready because she just came on and she ran and she was like, yeah, that's what they told me, that don't look down, just go up and just jump. And then she even fainted when she kind of got down. She fainted, and
wow.
There's a river and they brought this boat to kind of grab them. And so then she, came back in her senses. But, these are all just, if she had the courage to jump, at that point, that's what you focus on, right? You focus on the fact that she had the courage, both of them had the courage to jump. So I won't instill my my fear, my insecurities, my negative energy into their journey. Let them do whatever it is that will make their soul soar. And with that, we are at 9:02, and we do need, as wonderful as this has been, and it's always about me trying to learn, trying to get answers, and I feel that in that process, if we can change the lives of other people, then we do that along the way. So Christy, thank you for being here and for sharing so many pearls of wisdom, and hopefully we can touch lives. I will let you share any parting words, anything about your life that you feel has given you the courage and the spirit and the high to keep going on. So anything you want to share, it's yours.
Well, the last little bit that I'll say, first off, thanks once again for having me. It was absolutely beautiful. And I guess I'm on my phone, so I'm actually going to take it over here. My why for all of this is this thing right here. I'm going to read it to you to finalize the whole evening. This is why I'm a doctor and why I do what I do. Because I honor the inborn potential of everyone to be truly healthy. I desire to help the newborn, the aged, those without hope, because I choose to care for the patient with the disease, not the disease. Because I wish to assist rather than intrude, free rather than control, and I seek to correct the cause, not its effect. Because I know doctors don't heal, only the body can heal itself. And I've been called to serve others because I want to make a difference, and every day I get to witness miracles. That's the why for why I do what I do. It's been an absolute pleasure being with you tonight, and that's my calling and why I love what I do, just to support and help guide anyone for whatever they need.
Wonderful. Christy, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to remove you from the screen and just end the show real quick.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. So I did that after quite some time, but thank you all for watching these shows, for taking the time out. I know every minute is precious, and we are all busy living hectic lives. So thank you all for coming out of your way, for going out of your way and coming and seeing me and wishing me and sharing and telling me what the podcast means to you, because it has been my own journey, but when it becomes someone else's journey, right there, it is life-changing. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to end the show here. So here goes.